Hi, I'm Makenzi, and this is my testimony. So some of you may know, about a year ago, I was put in the hospital. It all started when I was down in Texas with my dad over spring break, and I started throwing up really, really bad. We went to the walk-in clinic, and they said it was just the flu, it was no big deal, and it'd wear off in a couple of days. Well, after throwing up for 2 nights and 2 days straight, I went to the ER, and they immediately gave me a room. I couldn't hold any food down, and they knew something was wrong. So they started running tests. Nothing came back in the blood test, so they said we were going to have to keep going until we found something. After a couple of days, my mom came down. She flew down to stay at the hospital with me, and that's when I realized that this was serious, something was going on. So we started running tests, and we did everything from blood tests to things where I had to drink this liquid chalk stuff, and they would watch it go down. And they didn't find anything. So they said, she hasn't eaten in about 5 days. We need to give her some nutrients. So they gave me a feeding tube up my nose and down my throat. And they said there's no way that I could throw this up. Well, later that night, I was throwing up and it came up in my mouth. And the nurse had to come in and try to put it back in, and she couldn't. And so she had to pull it out through my nose. Yards and yards of tube was pulled out through my nose. And the traumatizing part to me was just the whole fact that here the nurse, not to be like gross or anything, but here this nurse had her hands down my throat, and I was throwing up and I was crying, and it was just, after that was done, I felt defeated. At this point, they said the next step was to surgically put a feeding tube into my stomach, and it was just really hard knowing that I had no control over the situation and that I didn't know what was coming next. That night, I just laid back and I shut the world out and I cried myself to sleep, and I didn't know why God had given me this and made me deal with this, and it was really hard. All of this happened on a Wednesday night. The next morning I woke up and they told me that we were going to fly home and stay at a hospital closer to home so the family could come visit. At this point I lost about 13 pounds, which isn't a lot unless you only started out at 105. So my mom put me in a wheelchair and was wheeling me around just to get out of the room. And we passed by the food court, and it smelled really good. And we were sitting there, and I saw a lemonade machine, and I said, "Mom, I want some lemonade." And she wouldn't let me because my food had been, my body had been rejecting food. But I said, "Mom, this is the first time that food has even sounded good." And so she got me some lemonade, and I sipped on it, and I held it down. So I sipped on it some more, and it stayed down, and so I was drinking lemonade again. So later that night, they introduced me to broth, and I sipped on it and I held it down. And I was so excited. This was a turning point for me being in the hospital. The next day, we flew home, and we went to Children's Mercy in Kansas City. And they saw that I was drinking lemonade and broth, so they introduced me to Jell-O, and I held it down. So they introduced me to mashed potatoes, and I held it down. After seeing my progress, they said that they would keep me for another day and then I could go home. I was in the hospital for a total of 9 days, and they still don't know what was wrong with me. But we do know. That Wednesday night, when I was at rock bottom, this youth group came together and prayed for me. My grandmother's church came together and prayed for me. My friends and family and their churches came together and prayed for me that one night, and I woke up the next day healed. To me, that was God saying that I'm here with you, I don't leave you. Of course, when I look back on that, I see all the bad memories, the stuff that happened. But I also think that it reminds me that God's there for me, that He heals me, and He gave me this testimony to be able to share with all you. And that's so much to me, and that definitely brought me closer to God.